Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Deep Dive Film School uses the footage only for purposes of education, commentary, and criticism under fair use. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School.
This week we get into our third installment of You Should See This Festival with 2018's Roma by Alfonso Cuarón.
Let's dive on in. Everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And please, if you like what you see /hear, like and subscribe, leave us some comments or criticism or your thoughts about the movies, play along at home, all those good things. Yes.
Yes, so You Should See This Festival, movies that I want you to see that you haven't yet, and feel free to at home if you haven't watch this as well. Obviously, actually, all of our episodes, you should watch the movie before you.
We do spoil. We there is the warning at the beginning for that, but this one, and I mean, yeah, I think that this has been this is 2018 and was released on Netflix, right?
That's right. Yeah, very controversial, and
this is what Spielberg was talking about when he was like, I don't know if these movies should be able to compete if they didn't have
an amazing piece of art. Plus, it also swept the Oscars.
Yes,
and did all sorts of things. As far as setting records go.
Well, and Alfonso Cuarón, he won 2016 for Gravity, and then 2018 he does this and he wins. And I have wondered because although, like you said, we're saying earlier,
Children of Men as well.
Well, and you were saying about Gravity, people loved it, but there were a lot of other people who sort of derided it as it's two of the most famous actors in the world in front of a blue screen, right?
Yeah, Gravity's great.
But I think that I don't know if you ever heard any of that criticism, but it was almost as if he was like, okay, you guys, you think that's...
I'm going to do a day in the life of a Mexican-made...
3 hours long.
1970s.
Black and white, all subtitled. Not just subtitled...
Very personal story,
Not just subtitled in Spanish, but also Mixtec, so an indigenous language. So there's two levels of subtitles here. Like you said, very personal. Cuarón did what
Based
in this?
Off of his life. He's supposed to be Paco in this movie.
The little blonde boy, right?
And then the lady who this is about, her name is Lebo.
Yes,
is a real life maid
who
that
the
his family had.
The movie's dedicated to her.
Yeah,
and I don't. To give you any idea of the impact that this movie had on me after I finished watching it,
you went to Google the picture of what she looks like.
Yes. And there's a picture. He invited her to the first screening.
Yeah.
And she's she's this tiny little thing, and she's got her arms around his waist and is looking up at him, but she's also got kind of a stern, badass look to her. And I totally started crying.
Oh wow.
I was just like, this is so cool.
He's had her star in some of his movies.
Yeah, some of his early stuff, right?
Y Mamo Tambien. But obviously a big impact on his life and this 1 year in Mexico City where they kind of went through. But he's one of the bratty kids.
He wrote, directed,
and shot. He was a cinematographer of this. Wow. Edited maybe?
That opening scene.
Maybe, sure. Why not?
That opening scene with the water on the tile.
I know.
And the airplane that flies by through it. Oh my God.
Absolutely. We just flippantly say, oh yeah, he shot it too, but that's his greatest strength. Absolutely. Similar to someone like maybe Soderbergh that shoots his own movies, very few directors actually shoot their own movies. And
you could see that kind of stuff in something like Children of Men, where these long take shots.
There's moments here where we have a pregnant lady running through the streets of a rioting Mexico City, and I'm like, this is flashbacks to Children of Men.
Totally.
We'll get to those scenes and all that stuff, but he did everything here, and the cinematography. Holy shit! Just the fact that the whole credit sequence, like you're talking about. It's just credits, and we're hearing this sloshing of water, and we don't know exactly what's happening. But the fact that how did he come to pick that spot to be able to, one, get that reflection of the airplanes, and two, to pull up after the title card and get this amazing shot of this weird-ass garage?
Yeah. That feels like and this
like
house,
beautiful
this
movie.
garage and this house are characters, and they
Absolutely.
It reminded me of
It's the one thing you keep coming back to. It's the one thread, right? Is the front of this house. It has this unique, we get a unique angle or something unique happening in front of it.
Yeah, because it's kind of like it's
Every
almost has
time.
this like atrium look to it. There's
Yeah.
this courtyard in the middle of the house, and however they built the house, or
you
however they built the rig for the camera to be able to spin and move up those stairs all the way up that middle atrium and back down again.
How good he is at the longer shots and innovating in that area.
Well, and rigging. I mean, you think
Yeah.
about the car scene from Children of Men, right? Like
yeah.
just the ability
Absolutely.
to build this thing
Classic.
that can kind of spin around
Please
in
go
these
see
different
that.
ways. Children of Men.
Yeah, just that scene. Just go watch that scene.
Yeah.
It's outstanding.
But what I was going to say is that one of the things that this reminded me of, and it reminded me of this movie for a number of reasons, but I remember when we were talking about the movie To Live, and we were talking about that we were seeing the intimate portrayal of average people from a period of time that's outside our experience.
Yeah.
And that there's an attention to detail with that
Absolutely.
that gives you this certain rush, this certain prickling on the back of your neck. And the same thing is true here, where it's just like that atrium garage and the courtyard house and the little dog that runs back and forth.
Dog shit everywhere.
Dog shit everywhere. Well, even down to the way in which the two maids who are really kind of our main characters.
Yeah.
Even the way that they press their coffee, right? Or the way that they clean out the
the little
dishes.
details.
Just these little details that I'm like, I felt like I had done like an
agree.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where I had climbed inside of Cuarón's head to see the way that he saw these
For sure.
things.
It reminds me of the Herzog movie Strozek when they
Yeah.
go into the little baby where the newborns are, and they hold the baby up on with their fingers, and it's just this
Scene pulls
magical
me.
moment
Yes.
inside of the movie that is about way more stuff. But this movie is about life and the chaos of life, because he does the Linklater thing where it is a kind of day in the life of this woman, this maid of I keep reading middle class family. I mean, they have a pretty nice house. I'd maybe say middle upper class.
Well, and it makes you
but
wonder
they're-
too, because the relationship between the wife and the husband, it's like he's obviously pretty well off and is
Yeah.
maybe doling
He's a
some of
doctor.
it out to his family, but then a lot of it is not going
Sure.
to the family, and we get
we'll-
into that
we'll
later.
get into that relationship, but the main character here, Cleo.
Yes.
There's a lot of things. It takes a little bit to kind of get used to Cleo, because we're not really. We're just kind of watching her clean the house and go through her day. And you're like, where is this movie going? There's not a ton of plot points. And then obviously, partially through, probably after the first act, we really get into some serious plot points and stuff that changes the outcome of the whole rest of the movie and how
Right.
you feel and how she became attached to this movie.
This is taking place in 1970. 1970?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is right, this is right during this political uprising that's happening in Mexico City. And I think that this idea of these political machinations and this really, deadly massacre, this incident that takes place, is part of the backdrop to our to part of our movie, and one of our characters does end up becoming part of that. The boyfriend of Cleo's, Furman.
Furman.
But I was reminded in a lot of ways of you think of something like, again, a movie like To Live does this very well, of showing These people just trying to live their lives, and in the meantime, it's year zero behind them of the Communist Party, in China. But here it's
year zero. That sounds just daunting.
Yeah, it's terrifying, right? And then there's something very similar that's happening here. And the movie it always makes me think back to is, even though it's done to a comedic extent, but you think of Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, our two little monk buddies, who there's big battles and wars happening all around them, and they are just concerned with the people they care about, and they could care less about everything else. Now, Hidden Fortress only does that a little bit and sticks to a lot of the main plot points. Obviously, those two monk characters were the basis for C-3PO and R2-D2.
Yep. Right. I was just going to say that.
that Lucas then goes and does. But I love an actual story that really is just about these small parts, and there is an intersection that gets really scary.
Major life events that happen throughout.
Yes, there is.
And one in particular that we'll get to, but let's real quick before we get into the heavy dramatic stuff. Let's talk about parking a car in this fucking garage.
I loved that, and I can't.
How small it is.
So there's a French director whose name I can't think of. I'll put it up here, but he did a series of these kind of avant-garde abstract slapstick movies in the 1960s, and my favorite is called Mon Oncle, my uncle, and this car parking scene could have come from Mon Oncle, where it's just like there's no language barrier. You are just watching a gag, and you are watching the gag play out, and just the hand furiously smoking and stabbing it out and squishing over the dog shit, and then like bunka bunka bunka, and all the kids like, Dad's home, and just
they
like
really dwell on it. How painful it is.
Perfect though. It is a perfect comedic sequence that reminds me of some of the best European films from the 1960s and 70s that I remembered seeing as a kid, where I was just like, again, I kept having this weird displaced deja vu while watching this, where this movie feels like it was from the 1970s, not just about the 1970s.
And this is his version of the truth, right? This is he wrote this movie. 70% of it 70% of it was just from memory.
Yep.
Of just things that he could try and remember how they happened. So this is his truth, right?
Which explains why there is some dryness. And this is not a critique. This is a critique. This is not a criticism.
Yeah.
Why there is some dryness and lack of personality when it comes to Cleo and Adela as the two housekeepers, as well as Sophia, the mother, as well as the caricature of the father, is I think that he, none of these characters are really established. Like, we don't know anything about Cleo other than that she's the housekeeper, and then the events that take place in her life, right? And you go, but that's exactly how a little boy would remember it. He would just remember this strong, silent type who sometimes plays with him, is caring about him, and then he's trying to understand this thing that, this miscarriage that she has, or the stillborn baby, this event that takes place in her life, as well as even the political massacre, even all those pieces are just these,
all happens in the same day.
And it's all these it's just these signals, right? Because that's what it's like to be a child, is that your memory of it is like, you don't remember parking the car or walking into the circus. You just remember the elephant, right? Because the elephant is the most memorable part of it. And so it's like, there are these sections that are missing, but that's part of what makes it almost feel more personal than if he had tried to sketch out Cleo as like a real individual person, and we knew what town she was from in the little village that she came from in Oaxaca, like.
So you like jumping into someone's life like that?
I do, because as you said, kind of keeps you guessing, and also makes you realize that you're in a memory. And that's really okay, and that's part of what made this feel very classic to me. Obviously, another movie that it reminded me probably the most of out of any of the movies that I've been throwing down here would be Fanny and Alexander. It reminded me so much of Fanny and Alexander. Fanny and Alexander also feels like a memory, right? It's also missing a lot of details of its time and place, and instead is focused on the actual details of the way that the coffee
little
cups
kids.
looked,
Yeah.
and the way that in which they put their shoes on, right? Like all these little things that only a kid would pay attention to, not a larger
I
political
hadn't thought
landscape.
about that movie, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And because that's a very day in the life type of movie as well.
And just magical in the same way,
Yeah.
where you're seeing things you've never seen before. You've never, and you're living in this house with this group of people, and they're all kind of talking over each other, and you have to suss out what the important nuggets are. I love that about this.
Absolutely. Let's get into this relationship a little bit between the mom and the dad, because we really see it through her eyes and some through the kids' eyes of what's happening. The kids are mostly ignorant of what's going on, but like there's these little hints. The dad comes home, for maybe a couple weeks, and then he's gone again. He's always in Quebec, and it's starting to seem like he's never around.
And
like, he has his second life somewhere.
This camera that's just kind of moving from room to room catches just a snippet of the argument, right? And that he is pawning off his dissatisfaction with being home to how the maids aren't taking care of the house well enough, right? And so then we go, oh, that's going to come back later. And so there are these little ways in which we can pick up, these kind of breadcrumbs to give us enough information to understand what's going to happen next.
Well, later, yeah, and it takes a little bit to get there, but they finally build it up, and mom gets rid of the car, and she fucks up the wall and all this stuff, and it's
That is the most incredible sequence,
It's
because again, it's the
amazing.
payoff to the first half,
Exactly.
right? If the first half is like this da 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 joke of like trying to get the car in, then her just going all the way out is like the perfect punchline to that joke. Now we do get some moments that are not part of this childlike memory, from the
For sure, like
the children.
Cleo goes to the hospital.
Well, before that, Cleo goes to the movies, the quote unquote movies, with Fermier. Furman.
Furman, yeah, and we get some naked martial arts.
We do get some naked martial arts, which again, like it's such an amazing sequence, because you're just like, it's so funny that she's like just looking at him like, you dork, right? And that he is like
into martial arts.
Well, he's into Bruce Lee, right? Like he wants to be Bruce Lee, and it just makes you wonder, like.
Well, it makes sense too for his character later.
But it's such an interesting insight to be like, you think about kids who join paramilitary groups,
Sure.
and you're like, okay, like in the 1970s, late 1960s, 1970s, like what are kids into that they would then join, that they would get indoctrinated into something like that, and you go, kung fu, total wannabe badass kung fu kids, right?
Later they actually go to the movies, and that's where she tells him that she thinks he's pregnant.
Yeah.
And he plays it cool. He's like, well, that's a good thing, right? That's awesome. And then he goes to the bathroom and is like, hey, do you need anything? Leaves his jacket.
Yep.
Never comes back.
Never comes back.
Dick move, obviously.
Yes, and he's much more than just a jerk too.
Absolutely. And then she yeah, it gets heavy for sure. Later she kind of tries to get Ramon, his friend, to find out where he is at this martial arts camp, and she confronts him, and he basically straight up fucking threatens her.
Yep.
With life of both the baby and her if he ever even sees her face again.
And this whole paramilitary group camp is really interesting. And and the other thing that I think is interesting is, there's been a lot of speculation over time that particular, I'll put up the name of the group that he was a part of. There's speculation that that paramilitary group was actually funded by a faction of the CIA, in sort of one of their classic, like, go overthrow these guys kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And they touch on that. There's just the slightest moment when she goes to their training camp that you're like, oh, there's some Americans there.
Yeah.
And I just thought, like, what a great little nugget. Again, never having to actually shine a flashlight on it, but just like sprinkling that in so that if you are, because I remember seeing that and being like, why are there American soldiers there? And then when I was doing some research into it, it was like, oh, there's been a lot of speculation that they were down there actually helping to train these guys. And there's this like Hollywood actor there, this like kung fu guy who's like way past his prime, who's like, who can do the special breathing exercises, who can do all the, and it's
so
such
ridiculous.
a great moment. It's again, a little bit of levity, a little bit of humor
for
in
sure,
there.
and like not in a movie that's so heavy dramatically, like those moments you're almost wondering like, is this supposed to be funny? Because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think it's ridiculous, but is this a cultural thing that I'm like dismissing, or?
Or is it almost more like is it a cultural thing that I'm dismissing? Definitely that could be part of it. But then I think to a deeper point is it's like, because there's an absurdity that happens quite a bit in this movie. And it's not always a humorous absurdity. Sometimes it's more just for surrealism. So again, you know, our backdrop here is that we have all these political issues happening. There's this student uprising that's taking place. There's the paramilitary groups that are training, and all of it's going to lead up to this terrifying sequence
but
later.
It's all in the outside world. It's nothing we actually see.
Right, and so that
But like just the idea of the plane flying over in that opening scene.
Yes.
Is kind of showing you like, oh, there's an outside world here, right?
And the surrealism that he plays with that means that you have something that if the movie was about the political uprising, the movie was about the student protests,
it's not. It's about Cleo.
The band, the marching band that's walking down the street would make sense that they're there.
Them,
But instead, the marching band in this amazing surrealist kind of moment is just coming down there while she is pleading with her husband to come back.
Yeah.
Instead, they're pleading while they're walking through this marching band, and you go, that's brilliant.
Those moments definitely remind me of To Live, and those, like you were saying,
where they're just
Day One, where
surreal.
they're coming around and saying, give us all your silver, all your metal, all this stuff. And it doesn't get quite to that point, but like that atmosphere that's going on out here, that
turbulence.
Yeah,
it's this turbulence.
It's just building this tension, right? We obviously have to go back to some of these scenes. He loves the long, slow pan.
Yes.
And those details you're talking about are scattered through everything. The scope of some of the stuff that he does, like even something like when they go visit they don't really say who they are, but it's like family, and they go camping.
Yeah.
And just scanning through the campsite, there's so much shit going on.
Yeah.
There is so many extras in this movie too. Like it is deep, like with people, and it's real people. It's not practical. It's not facts or anything like that.
Yeah, the staging of where everyone is.
Actually, the more we talk about this, that's a very good companion piece to this movie. But like the slow pan shots, and even when she's up on the roof doing laundry, and she's playing dead with Paco and just having fun. And you know, these kids obviously love her. She's a motherly figure, no doubt. But after he gets up and he's not dead anymore, and he runs away, we pan across and you see this layers of maids doing laundry in the background, and you're like,
just rooftop after rooftop after rooftop.
Time.
Yep. So these extras have been back there doing all this that entire time. Well, and then you think about, so there's those kinds of moments, and then there's
every shot becomes epic in this movie.
There's this breathtaking scene that's just
scene.
Well, no, I was gonna. It's closer to the end, but it's just where they're eating at this seafood restaurant, I guess, or something, and there's that gigantic lobster
that's right,
with its lobster claw out, and just the framing of that, I was like, that is the most classic looking sequence. Like
the framing of the scene where she loses the baby, probably the hardest scene in the entire movie.
Agreed.
Easily the hardest scene. Like, can't think of anything worse. And they did that in one shot because the nurses and the doctors were not real actors, but he wanted it to seem more real. And the framing in that shot is like, what? Like,
that's insane.
How do you do that? How do you do that? I mean, he's a
but you
special.
Said it,
special
you said
filmmaker.
it earlier, man. The birthing scene in Children of Men is also all in one shot, and you're like, how could you possibly?
He's a master.
Pulled that off.
To be able to pull off some of these shots he does, and we'll get to the final
And it
one
doesn't
at the
feel
end.
like, and here's the thing about that, it doesn't feel like showing off. It keeps the heightened pitch of drama to have that all be one shot. Like
Absolutely.
that feels very necessary. It doesn't,
Because
it's not
that's
a
real
Brian,
life.
it's not
Real
a
life
Brian De
doesn't
Palma
have
thing
jump
where he's
cuts.
like, hey, that whole thing, that was all one shot. Like, this is to keep that heightened pitch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, the real life, is
Doesn't
like
have
that.
cutaways.
Yeah, and it also just doesn't have, you're in the moment. You have to keep being in that moment for it to seem real.
Yes, completely.
And we'll talk about this ending scene near the end of the review because it's fucking just mind-blowing. But this movie is on par, and this is a high bar, is on par for me with Children of Men as far as the cinematography goes. Like, he's achieving equally as amazing stuff as he did in that movie that he does here with some of these long shots. Just absolutely stunning. He should be the cinematographer on all of his movies.
Well, the one thing that I would hope for is that his continued career, and I'm this is probably true, that his continued career takes such wild swings into different territories.
Yeah.
I'd love to see him do a musical. I'd love to see him
horror
do a
movie.
horror movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because the swing
Like,
from
he's got
Children
a
of Men
shi-
to
he's got a
Gravity to
shining
this,
in him,
totally,
right?
totally. Well, I mean, I just think that there's something. This movie has such a classic feel to it, in terms of the way that it's framed, the way that it's directed, the way that it was written, the way that it's acted. I mean, the fact that the woman who played Cleo, this is the only acting role she's ever had.
And she was at the Academy Awards that year.
I mean,
Amazing. She
but
was a
it's-
teacher waiting for her papers to register. She had to wait like 9 months and had nothing to do, and ended up getting the job and doing this. And she was just like, okay.
I mean, teaching's cool. It's really
Academy
cool.
Awards are
It's
cooler.
it's very worthwhile. But my God, it's
Now-
just such a magical film.
It absolutely is. Let's talk about these two final scenes. Not two final scenes, but two major scenes
Yes.
that are left here. The first one, I guess let's touch on real quick where she goes to the hospital, finds out how pregnant she is and what to wait for, and she's in here with the babies in the hospital, and this earthquake happens.
Yep.
And it's very sudden, but she doesn't do anything, and she's literally standing in the worst spot in front of glass.
Yep.
But the way they shoot this, and there's that the roof caves in and falls on all these brand newborn babies, and you're like, ah,
Oh, it's so
what's happening? But
terrifying.
like, luckily everything was fine. But the way, and just seeing the aftermath of that. But then we get to this.
Well, you're
scene-
like, what else can happen?
yeah,
Right? Because
Oh,
the
lots can
sequence
happen.
because the sequence right after that is
going to pick out a crib.
they're
Right?
going to pick out a crib
with grandma.
Mhm. And again, like just the scenery of seeing a shopping center in 1970 Mexico City,
yeah.
you're like, I love it. This is so period. Like everything is so perfect. And then all of a sudden,
He's getting furniture and all those details and all this stuff to match this period piece.
and
It's
then
wild.
we get the paramilitary group, and just that how scary where they're looking out the window and they're going, "Is someone shooting? Are they shooting?" Right? And you just go, "Ooh,
Well,
ooh, ooh!"
They're
That is
looking
like-
at a crib, and then bam, chaos happens
Yep.
outside, and you can hear it.
Yep.
But he does this. This is probably his classic move, but just that slow pan over to reveal
Yep.
this chaos in the streets.
Yep.
And all these people rioting, and you get this crazy perspective, and then you see people start running in to the building, and
Doesn't that remind you again to
know.
go back to Children of Men, the car scene
Yeah.
when the people in the motorcycle come up, and at first they feel far enough away that our main characters don't seem in danger.
Yeah.
And as you said, that slow pan, we don't realize that the depth of field is so intense that it's only going to take that person that seems way over there about 2 seconds to run directly into danger zone for our main characters.
Yep.
And he does the same thing here, and it is so scary.
Yeah.
It is so tense.
Absolutely. I think these long shots really test the audience, not only with how much tension there is, but like how much patience they have for this.
Yes.
But
Way
he's
more than
so-
somebody eating a pie, to harken back to a couple weeks ago.
Yes, absolutely. But so people start running into this building, and a guy gets killed. He's running, trying to hide. He gets killed right in front of his wife. All this terrible shit, and she's just standing there, and they pan back over, same shot still,
Yeah.
and Furman's standing there with a gun to Cleo and Grandma.
He's the one.
And the father of her child, he could take her life just like he said last time he saw her. He ends up not doing it,
And her
but
water
it is
breaks.
such an intense scene that her water breaks. Like, what else can happen? Like even when they're
Just talking about it, I'm like all wound up again.
even
It's
when they're
so
camping,
tense.
like there's a fire in the forest that
Yeah.
they can't control.
Yeah.
And like he loves big things happening that you can't see.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's a great horror movie trope, if you ask me. Like,
yeah.
it's what you
Jaws.
can't see
Yeah.
is what
It's
way
Bruce
scarier.
the shark. Yeah.
Exactly. What you can't see is way scarier. So anyways, that's one scene.
We like this movie. I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah, we're gushing. But then we get the stillborn scene that we've talked about, which is just
So hard, so rough.
again, yeah, just the worst thing ever. And they come back. She comes back home. We get a little time that's gone by, and the mom wants to take her on a beach vacation just to make her feel better, get out of, she's had a rough couple months here.
Yeah.
About 9 months,
Yeah.
actually, from beginning to end. This
It
has
still
not been
feels like
good.
it's over the course of a day.
Exactly. And the husband, the potential father is a piece of shit, and all this stuff.
Murderer.
And so they do this beach vacation, and they immediately stop. They can't even go to the hotel. The kids jump right into the water. There we discover that Cleo can't swim. We go and do a few things and hang out, and then end the trip to go back to
The last day.
the last day.
We're going to be on the beach
Let's
again.
go on the beach, and kids are going crazy, doing all this stuff. Mom wants to leave. So this is, again, building up to this one big shot. Like I said, every shot in the last half of the movie is seems so epic.
Yep.
And has so much detail, like Wes Anderson type detail in a lot of these things, but obviously not as kitschy and
But like
fun,
that
but
you're setting up a sequence where you're like,
Absolutely.
okay, here's this tracking shot where we're going to move up and down the beach 4 times, and it's going to be 5 minutes long, and everything has to happen
Yeah.
in this shot.
And you talked about depth of field earlier in some of these shots. This final epic scene,
incredible.
It's on par with the baby being brought out of the bombed out building in Children of Men.
Yeah.
It's the one shot thing that he's so good at, and he's mastered in my mind. But here, we're all the way back to where the car is.
Yep.
And talking to mom, hey, don't go too far. Cleo can't swim. And we pan back, and then we kind of go back, and one of the kids is back, and Cleo's taking care of her. But then she starts to get worried and goes back, and
she's walking such a distance, and that camera is
sure.
just rolling along.
exactly.
with her.
And we go about 100 yards into the ocean on this one shot, and you're like, I mean, obviously
some of the
kind
waves
of
are huge.
crane-
They're right in front of the
Yeah.
camera.
The kids start getting swept up, and they're gone. You can't see them anymore, and Cleo can't swim, and she's trying, and she's going for it, and it's just like, whoa!
And
what
in
a
that
scene.
moment,
What a scene!
in that moment, the story has been told in such a way that I was more shocked that both of those children survived.
Yeah,
I would not have been surprised at all
for sure.
if we
it
would have
was
lost one of those
Inarritu,
kids.
they would be dead.
Well, sure. It would also be the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, right.
It'd be before the opening title sequence.
We're comparing Mexican directors, but yeah.
That's really
I
funny.
agree. The fact that she saves their life makes it much more special.
Yeah.
And that much more heroic. And the fact that they say it and tell the mom, and the mom comes running up in the middle of it, and for a minute you're just like, this is you already had all this horrible shit happen.
Yeah.
Please don't let these kids die.
And then when they all huddle around her and are telling her that they love her,
That shot.
that break between Sophia and Cleo, where the sun
Yes.
is just saturated
The real
through
sun.
it like this, like a jewel,
But
and
the-
it's oh man,
It is. I mean, it's hard to describe. We're showing it on the YouTube channel, I'm
Yeah.
sure, right now. But the depth of field, like how perfectly centered that sun is, when like the
God.
time of day they had to do that. Like,
yeah, to be able to get that shot is
I
just
know.
masterful.
I know it comes off as masterful, and it absolutely is. But it's also, if you can be good at planning like that, your movies may not take as long to shoot, right? Like it's you're and I mean, unless something goes wrong,
Right. Instead, you're focused
it could
on
backfire for sure.
Right, but you're focused on particular things. You're focused on very, very
And also,
particular
you're
things.
spending 5 minutes of movie on one shot,
Yeah.
and 5 minutes of a normal movie would take half a month to shoot.
Well, it makes you realize that
But you have to have those details in place.
he, as a director, must be an incredible communicator.
Absolutely.
To be able to get all those people to do all those things at just the right time in just the right way, and to feel comfortable enough to be able to be like, oh yeah, I can do this shot in this way and I can get everything that I need. And half of your people are A, non-actors,
Yeah.
B, kids, and throw in a dog.
Also, it forces you to show, not tell, right? It
Totally.
forces you to show, not tell, which is
this whole movie. I mean, this whole movie is, as I said, it's like a memory. It is very much like a child's memory, and this Valentine, this love letter to this woman.
They always come back home, right?
Yep.
Back to this place, to this. It's not. I wouldn't even call it a character in the movie. Maybe it is, but it's just like, I don't know. It's this place of comfort, right? This place
I mean,
where
I
you
think
can
it's
come.
I mean, to me,
I mean,
is
it's not a character like certain movies, like haunted house movies or something.
No,
like that,
no.
like,
But it's more that you even, I even think that, like, when we see her walk up the stairs to her apartment in the beginning, and it feels like it means one thing, and we
like
see
class
her
warfare, like you stay out there.
exactly, and then we see her walk up those stairs at the end, and it very much feels like something different,
sure.
where it's like she is a member of this family, and I think that that's what makes it into a character in this
Absolutely.
symbolic way.
Amazing year in the life of
Yeah.
these different classes for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He definitely hits on this. These different ethnicities, this political chaos, social chaos,
Yeah.
but these normal people that are just trying to get through life, going through that, and it's just masterful. This was the second time I watched it, and it was just like, wow.
It reminded me so
It blew
much.
me away way more than the first time.
It reminded me so much of the movies that my dad and stepmom would have me watch when I was a kid. That were, a lot of European films that were these sort of like, these classics, these big classics, and having a real appreciation for them because they gave me this. Even when they were ugly in parts, they still gave me this cozy feeling because they just felt important, and that's the way that Roma feels.
Wow.
Very much.
Well, there you go. We gushed about it. We had to, I think.
Yes, very much so.
It's that good. So
Yes.
please go see it. If you haven't, you should see this.
Yep.
Also, please like and subscribe. We're here every week. Every Friday we have new episodes. So please subscribe so you see those and play along like we asked before. But yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School. Oh my god.
All right.
Fuck. Okay.
Sorry.
It's just like zooms in on you like Garth, we're live.
Wayne? Where are you, Wayne?
Where are you, Wayne? Okay.